welcome to another episode of Power Talks. Now, we know that beyond efficiency and scale, GCCs are now at the heart of sustainability goals. And in this episode, we're going to unravel how GCCs are becoming the catalysts for green transformation. Joining me in the studios for this conversation is Avinash Samrit, President and Country Manager at Clean Harbours. We're also joined by Deepak Malkani, Head of GBS India at AkzoNobel. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us for this conversation.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
All right, it's an honor. Starting with you only, sir, we know that sustainability is the core to your industry, right? So from your vantage point, what unique role you see GCCs play in sort of accelerating the green transformation beyond efficiency and cost?
Sure. And as we hear of late that GCCs have evolved from just being, cost-saving, initiative to really high value addition. But I think there is something more we are doing from a sustainability standpoint, from an ESG standpoint. We are actually now the intelligence hubs. And the reason for that is we have access to all the data. We are building the intelligence behind the data that we collect and actually helping design programs and assessing the effectiveness of those programs. So I think, and using all the best of technologies and the manpower that we have, we are actually taking that step forward. And it's not just the typical back office kind of work that we are doing, it's actually the operational work that we are doing. So from just like we have back office transactional work, we actually have morphed ourselves into green powerhouses. So from sustainability as an aspiration to really as a mission which we are going to accomplish. That's where we have come so far, and there's still so much more to do in that space.
All right, from aspiration to
actual execution.
All right. Thank you so much for setting the context for us. Moving to you, Deepak. For AkzoNobel, it works with complex supply chains, be it in paints or coatings. And, these areas have big sustainability challenges, as we know. So how do you see sort of GCCs contributing in areas like energy use or waste reduction or anything else? Like, how is the sustainability initiative taking place in this area particular where there are apparently a lot of challenges?
Yes, thank you for the question. So I think from a GCC India perspective, we may not be producing the paint for the parent organization for that matter, but we sit on enormous amount of data, which we can really analyze through all sort of modern tools and technologies that are available. And using that data, we can actually predict a lot of things, around energy management, optimization, waste management, or even for that matter, avoiding overproduction. Supply chain challenges can also be solved. For example, rather than manufacturing goods in different sort of factories, you can optimize that and have lesser factories running at an optimum capacity. I think those are some of the ways through which we are adding a lot of value to the parent organization. Also, in our way of procuring goods, we are looking at suppliers not only from a cost perspective, but also from a perspective of what is the impact on sustainability that these suppliers are having. That is also a very good and key parameter for us before, we can really look at those suppliers. Overall, I think sustainability is not something which should be driven from a compliance mindset. I think it's time that we need to drive it from an impact mindset more than from a compliance mindset.
All right, on that note, let's also talk about the design and purpose. When we talk about scaling GCCs, how can we do that keeping the design aspect, keeping the sustainability goals in mind so that, we start from the day one and do not actually wait for some norms to come when it comes to the compliance, when it comes to the sustainability goals?
I think that's a very pertinent point. When we talk about new workspaces and GCC workspaces to start with, I think sustainability is not something which you add after you've done everything. After all, it has to be built as part of your strategy, and that I think is so very critical. So that would mean that be it the design, the energy usage of renewable energy, and then also it's all good to talk about. It's difficult to execute, But again, even once you execute, having those metrics to measure how those sustainability measures are actually working, and are we really achieving the goals that we set ourselves for from a sustainability standpoint. I think that is one of the most critical elements today, that we have grand plans, execution can be a little tricky, but then sustaining the sustainability is, I think, the most critical part. And that's where I think it's people, it's leadership that comes into play, wherein it has to be on top of your agenda and not an afterthought, as I said. So it has to be there from day one, so that we actually make it future proof from a sustainability standpoint. I think that is the approach that we should be taking. I'm proud that being a sustainability company, we do that all the time, but that should not be restricted to just one clean harbors. That's something everyone.
Oh, absolutely. And taking that point across to you as well, Deepak, when we talk about the sustainability focused GCCs, what do you think? Like, do you think that it requires a different kind of skill set or an infrastructure or an operating model than the traditional ones?
Yes, absolutely. In my opinion, you need a complete overhauling. It's not something that, as what Avinash said, it's not something that you can add in midway. If you are starting something from scratch, it's very important to incorporate sustainability related initiatives right at that stage. I believe a lot of companies are already working on, for example, providing full EV fleet to their employees. These are all of elements that you can't really add midway. Similarly, when you're hiring, look for people who are very conscious about, the sustainability impact and what we are doing as an organization. So I think holistically, that's what I believe in firmly.
Yeah, and you were also talking about data earlier. And I would like to take that point across to you as well. When we talk about data, when we know that a lot of green transformation depends on data, like emissions or reporting, a lot of other data as well, right? So how do you see your GCC or the GCCs in general becoming the digital backbone for the data?
Again, a wonderful question. So, a few things which we have to do with ESG data is first centralize that, to make it transparent, and democratize that data to the extent possible, so that we are all very transparent. People are aware of what exactly are we doing. One of the things that happen in many initiatives, and sustainability is not the only one, wherein things lose steam because people don't see any outcome, or maybe there are outcomes out there, but they are not being measured or not being seen. So I think centralizing that and demonstrating what difference are we making using these initiatives, I think that is something very, very critical. And then we have to take the next step, that move from just reporting to intelligence. And now we have so many tools available, wherein if you have the data, and the best part now is that no matter what format, what shape the data you get in, there are tools available which will make which will consume that data and produce the reporting that you have. And not just reporting, as I said, give those insights. And then obviously that will also mean traceability. I think that's another critical part. If something is not working, we sometimes end up acting on the symptom of the problem and not really solving the root problem. And I think that is where technology again comes into play. So we actually can be the digital tower of sustainability. So turning scattered data into pertinent information, actionables, and insights. That's how I see it.
Yeah, talking about the data and a lot of tech that GCCs are using now, taking that point across to you as well. There's a lot of AI automation happening at GCCs. How do you think are these sort of data or these technologies helping GCCs to take those greener decisions at scale?
Yes, that's a very important topic, and that's where we have to really look at best utilizing the synergies that are coming through the AI and automation and technology. I think enormous amount of data is available all around, and what is required is using that data and taking out meaningful insights. No longer is the time that you can move forward with a gut feeling. Always you can take decisions which are backed by data, and using this data, you can make a lot of greener decisions. For example, reducing energy, reducing water utilization, cutting paper, cutting travel, virtual meetings is the way. And many companies are moving towards that. I think the foundation is already there. I think the data is also giving us and talking through and giving us a lot of insights. It's time for all of us to basically act on that insight and drive the sustainability across our organizations.
All right, wonderful point made. And we need to now also talk about the challenges. As you were talking about that, how do we need to sort of solve the problem from the root? Before that, we need to speak about the challenges as well, right? So, talking about the challenges, what's the hardest part you feel about embedding those sustainability goals in the GCC charters? Like, what are those challenges that you face?
I think the fundamental element here is people. I mean, you can put together great strategies and roadmaps and plans, but unless people across levels, right from leadership to the juniorest most person in the company, buy into that vision, it's going to be challenging. So I think that is the fundamental thing that I would say. So we need people who would not only understand but embrace it as part of lifestyle. I'll quote an example. The amount of plastic bottles that we use, do we really need now? In hotels these days, a lot of good places, they have replaced plastic with glass. But in offices, I can tell you, if you do a math about every 100 employees in the company, how many plastic bottles that we, it's all boils down to people buying in and doing it. It's not up. I don't think it's about, oh, you penalize people or there is some small incentive. You can't give big enough incentive, but you can't penalize people on that. But if the mindset is what so I think that's about mindset. If the mindset shifts, I think we will have a significant improvement overall on the sustainability agenda overall as such, So it's not a metrics problem, not a talent problem. I think it's a mindset issue.
But how can we change that mindset as per?
Okay. And I think first and foremost is communication. We have to over communicate that this is what we'll do. Second is leading by example. I say all these things, and if I don't lead by example, that is one. Third, I think creating a lot of awareness. And the example I was quoting about plastic and things of that nature, when you tell people that, do you know that scientific studies have found microplastic in mother's milk? What worse can you expect out of not following the fundamentals of sustainability, right? I mean, we're talking about that, or the amount of wastage, as you say, right? They are all part of sustainability. Is not just about efficient power usage. Sustainability is about reducing the resources that we are wasting. Today, 10% of the food, consumer food that is cooked, whether in restaurants or at home, across the country gets wasted. Food equivalent to something that can feed 2 major states in the country. So it's all about, so when the reason I'm telling so is once you hear those stories, now you are able to relate to that, hey, I'm actually looking at a bigger cause and not something just because this leader is saying so.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Deepak, please come into the conversation. What are those cultural or operational challenges from your vantage point that you see are sort of hindering GCCs to act green?
See, I think it's more of a culture, as you rightly said. It's not something that you can teach somebody. It's part of the value system that you come across. I really look at Gen Z, and there were recent surveys that were published also. Almost 60% of Gen Z population wants to work for a company which are thoroughly committed to sustainability efforts. Just think of it, this can be a very, very powerful, hiring magnet, attraction magnet through which you can basically attract these people and hire them into the ecosystem. If you're thinking that you will hire somebody and teach that person that, how to respect sustainability efforts and all that, I don't think that's going to happen. And what a wonderful example that Avinash quoted. I think if you really think with that lens, something really, really drastic can happen in our country. for positive.
Gentlemen, as we are moving towards the end of the conversation, we are seeing a lot of GCCs setting up in tier 2 cities apparently. So do you see that GCCs expanding into tier 2 cities is basically looking at these cities as an opportunity, that too at zero cost or very low cost, right? So what's your perspective in this? How is this location strategy working out for the larger sustainability goals? I'll start with you.
Sure. So, one of the key elements that a tier 2 city brings, obviously lower cost. So there has to be some commercial angle to it. The cost is definitely lower. The rentals, I was told, is almost 50% of what you would pay else in tier 1 city. But beyond that, the the amount of commute that would be needed. So just look at the carbon emission that you are going to be able to control just by reducing the commutes. In some of our cities, this one-way commute is 2.5 hours. Tier 2 cities, it could be 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So that is one significant element. Overall, quality of life that you get, overall the ecological balance that you are able to maintain because the resources are consumed. There's more recyclability in the smaller places. I think that brings in enormous benefit from a sustainability standpoint, which makes beyond the cost savings and the talent retention and availability. That brings another very important angle for GCCs to look at tier 2 towns.
Tier 2. So what's your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. Fully agree with Avinash. I think when you are setting it up, your center in a tier 2 city, I mean, you have an advantage to, again, as I said, start from a scratch and build sustainability as part of your organization's DNA, which again cannot be done midway. And at the same time, look at all the avenues, all the possibilities through which you can contribute to Mother Earth, right? And with a fresh canvas, you can do a lot more than coming to an urban setup, metro tier 1 kind of a city. It becomes extremely difficult for you to incorporate these.
Right. So do you think that we can, like the GCCs in tier 2 cities can be made as green labs for enterprises?
Yes, 100%, I would say.
I agree. Yeah, they can be green labs and they can actually be role models as to how you can run a successful GCC and still have sustainability as part of your goals.
All right. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for being a part of this conversation. What I have understood perhaps from this conversation is that this is not only about a green balance sheet. It is much more than that. Right. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation and sharing your insights with us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
All right. And to our viewers, stay tuned for many, many more such exciting conversations as we join you with Power Talks.